All right, let's get into it. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest, most tangled scandals in recent American history, the story of Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to talk about the powerful secrets that were supposed to have died with him, but did they really?
So, where does this story even begin? Well, it starts on this private island, a place called Little St. James. Now, if you looked at the brochures, it was pure paradise. Think Caribbean heaven for the super rich and famous. But behind all that luxury, the locals had a much darker, much more chilling name for it. They called it Pedophile Island. Because for some, it was a private hell where young girls were allegedly trafficked and abused, with absolutely no way out.
And the man who owned this island? Jeffrey Epstein. You know, his story is, well, it's a weird one. He starts out as a high school math teacher. And somehow he skyrockets into these incredibly exclusive circles, becoming this high-powered financial advisor to the world's elite. We're talking a fortune of almost $600 million. How does that happen? That's the first big question.
Okay, so here's the thing you have to understand about Epstein. Yeah, the money was a big part of it, for sure. But his real power, his actual currency, was his connections. We're talking about a network that snaked its way into the absolute highest levels of society, all over the world.
And I mean, just look at this guest list. The range is kind of mind-blowing. You've got former presidents, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump. You've got British royalty, Prince Andrew. Then you have world-famous scientists, Hollywood stars. The list goes on. And you have to realize, this wasn't just about throwing fancy parties. This network, this guest list, it was his shield. So for years and years, whatever was happening on that island stayed secret. But then, in 2005, something happened. A single police complaint filed by a 14-year-old girl in Florida started to pull on a tiny little thread, and that one thread was about to unravel the whole thing. And what investigators found? Well, it shocked them. It started with that one brave girl, but it quickly became a domino effect. She named other girls, and then they named more. And pretty soon, police realized they weren't dealing with a one-off crime. No, this was a huge organized trafficking ring. That's when the FBI got involved and launched a full-blown investigation.
The way this whole thing worked was just horrifying. It was basically a pyramid scheme, a really twisted one. Epstein would actually pay his victims to go out and recruit other girls, their own friends, their classmates. He was using their trust, their youth, to create this constant pipeline of new victims. And yeah, most of them were underage. Just in that first investigation, police officially identified more than 36 minor victims. Let that sink in for a second. 36. And as it turns out, that was just scratching the surface.
Listen to this quote from one of the victims. "I just let them know that I'm vulnerable and I'm their perfect type." I mean, wow, that just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It shows you exactly how predatory this was. Epstein and his people weren't just finding girls by chance. They were actively hunting for the ones who were the most vulnerable.
So you've got this mountain of evidence, right? You have dozens of witnesses, you've got the FBI involved, a long prison sentence seems like a total slam dunk. A certainty. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. A secret deal was being cooked up by a federal attorney named Alexander Acosta. A deal designed to make this whole thing just go away.
And what was the result of that super-secret sweetheart deal? Get this, just 18 months. And not even in a real prison. It was a private wing of a county jail. Oh, and he got work release, so he could leave for his office 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It wasn't even a real sentence. It was a joke.
So after that slap on the wrist, Epstein just went right back to his old life. The private jets, the islands, all of it. And honestly, the story could have just ended right there. A complete and total failure of the justice system. But it didn't. And that's all thanks to one incredibly determined journalist.
Her name is Julie K. Brown from the Miami Herald, and she just would not let this story die. She spent years digging back into the case. Then, in 2018, she published this bombshell series called Perversion of Justice, and it laid everything out. Not just Epstein's crimes, but the whole story of that ridiculous plea deal that let him get away with it. People were furious. The public outrage was so huge, it actually forced authorities to open a brand new investigation.
And her work? It really showed the true scale of what happened. Remember that original number, 36 victims? Well, Julie Brown's reporting identified more than 80. That just goes to show you how much of this story had been completely buried.
Okay, so all this new public pressure leads to that new investigation. And that brings us to 2019, and probably the most shocking, most controversial twist in this entire story.
So in July of 2019, it finally happens. Epstein is arrested again, and this time, it's serious. He's facing up to 45 years in prison. It felt like, finally, justice was coming. But then, just about a month later, he was found dead in his jail cell in Manhattan.
Now, the official story is that it was a suicide. But that explanation, it just didn't sit right with a lot of people. I'm sure you've seen the meme, right? Epstein didn't kill himself. It went everywhere. And it became shorthand for this huge conspiracy theory that he was silenced, that he was killed to stop him from naming all the powerful people who were involved.
So, with Epstein dead, there was never going to be a trial. The guy at the center of this whole web was just gone. So naturally, the public pressure shifted to the next best thing. All of the court documents from his case. Thousands of them. The now famous Epstein Files. And people wanted to see them. So much so that Congress, in a rare moment of everyone agreeing, passed a bill demanding their release. But what we actually got? It was just a tiny fraction of the documents. And the ones we did get were covered in black marker, just heavily, heavily redacted. Hiding names, hiding dates, hiding whole paragraphs.
But here's the crazy part. Even with all those black bars, some really explosive stuff still came out. You had these really high-profile names popping up over and over again, connecting some very powerful people to Epstein. Through friendships, travel on his jet, and yeah, in some documents, through allegations of abuse.
And some of these details were pretty shocking. For instance, in the documents, you can see things related to Donald Trump, like flight logs from Epstein's private plane, and even some witness allegations. You see similar connections for other powerful men, like Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew. But again, you have to wonder, what are the most serious details that are still hidden behind those black bars?
And look, as jaw-dropping as some of this stuff is, we have to remember the most important part. These documents are incomplete, on purpose. All those redactions, all those blacked-out names, it means we're only seeing the slice of the story that someone, somewhere, decided was okay for us to see.
And that really brings us to what might be the most frustrating part of this whole mess. The documents we've seen, they're just the tip of the iceberg. There are still over 1 million documents related to this case that are sealed, hidden away from all of us.
So, that leaves us with the one central burning question, doesn't it? With so much still hidden, what else is in those files? What other names? What other crimes? What other abuses of power are still locked away? It seems like, for now, the full truth is still a secret.